can get the full benefit of our conversation and what we've talked about. So thank you for bearing with us. Apparently this whole thing is happening and unfolding in classroom after classroom around. Scott has to go around each classroom and set up. All right, we're doing a little bit of a flip-flop, and I hope this doesn't throw you off too much, but I think the most important session for us in terms of Speech College Now is the second one. And I know that English is undergoing a lot of changes too because of lots of assessment initiatives we have on campus. And they're doing some grading stuff in their second session too. And so we decided to just flip-flop that. So we're going to talk about our assessment rubric, the critique form, and so forth in this first session, and then we're going to deal with course requirements and focusing in specifically on changes and that kind of thing in the second session. But if you need to go over to the English room and get in on that grading conversation in the second session, don't lose heart because, as I said, it's going to be recorded. Everything's going to be recorded. I should have began by introducing myself. I know many of you. My name is Mark Fokin, and I am the Speech Communication Program Coordinator here on campus at SMSU. I work with about 3 College Now sites, so not a lot of them, and I've been doing it for a couple of years now. My partner today is Hillary Rasmussen, and many of you know her, and Hillary has been working in the College Now program for a couple of years as well, and works with many more sites than I do because it's really half of her load. Our intent today is to have some conversation about, in this session anyway, about our rubric for assessing communication competencies, oral communication competencies. Excuse me. And so, what we're going to do is share some orientation information first and then go through the oral communication rubric and talk about the critique form, and then also some of our assessment initiatives that we're working on campus and how that's going to impact College Now. First and foremost, in terms of getting you oriented and ready for this conversation, you should know that as a result of a Higher Learning Commission, our accrediting body at SMSU, their visit way back in 2005, we have been working on preparing a redesign of the liberal education program or the general studies requirements at SMSU, and part of that redesign is putting together an assessment plan for the general studies or the liberal education program as we call it. The speech communication program was tasked with creating a rubric for oral communication, and we, over a period of a couple of years, did some research, worked with the National Communication Association, as well as some resources from the association, the College Board, and then the the Communication Association of Minnesota. And we generated an oral communication rubric. It's going to come up. This is the Adobe Connect that's recording us right now. An oral communication rubric, and Hillary's passed it out, but if you go to the College Now website, where is it?
Left side. Left column.
Oh, there we go. I don't really get at it from here. Usually I go through academics. But if you go to the College Now website and you scroll to course information and resources, this is where you list all the courses that are available through College Now at SMSU. And you click on the Essentials of Speaking and Listening and Resources page. Here's where you'll find a whole bunch of resources. The rubric you'll find right here, so you can certainly download a copy for yourself later, but that's where you'll find it. Also the Essentials of Speaking and Listening Instructor Critique Form based off of this rubric and so forth. It's all there. We're going to take some time in this session to walk through the rubric, competency by competency and area by area, and I think I can minimize it, there we go. And so we get a better sense of what it is we're looking for in terms of oral communication competencies. The competencies are both in public speaking and in listening. We haven't done as much with listening yet, but because it's a secondary thing. We're focusing more right now in terms of assessment on the communication competencies, the oral communication competencies of speaking. The evaluative scale that we use to create the rubric, as you see in front of you, is a developmental one that goes from emerging to advanced. And so you can try to equate or use synonymous terminology if you want to, from poor to superior, but we don't like using the word poor because it's not a developmental term. It's more stigmatizing and labels students, and so we want to label them as being in an emerging stage of developing their skills and competencies in communication, and then they'll move developmentally through to a more advanced level. And those of you that are both doing speech and English are going to discover there's a very similar rubric that's been prepared for writing competencies as well. And I think they have a 4-point scale, freshman level, sophomore level, junior level, senior level. Because communication skills are so holistic, we decided, we had the conversation as a program, and we decided not to compartmentalize the things into, well, this is what a freshman would speak like, this is what a sophomore would speak like, this is what a junior, it just didn't make sense to us. It made more sense to say, these students, or this student, is emerging in terms of their delivery, or they are sort of an emerging level now in terms of topic selection and audience analysis and so forth, while this student is certainly at a more advanced level. So that's the evaluative scale and how that sort of came about. Whoops, now I have to go back. I forgot to use my return button. It's okay, it can be easily fixed. The assessment device, or the critique form that we, I already pointed that out on the College Now website. The critique form that we used to, or rather we developed from the rubric itself, is also an important piece of our assessment. And we rolled this out last August. Some of you may not have used it yet with your sites, but you might still be using the old critique form. This critique form, if you haven't used it yet, you will discover is a bit more helpful than the old one. It's a little more prescriptive. It isn't quite as blank and open. For the student evaluation of one another, in other words, the students doing peer critiques of one another, we have retained the old critique form because we like the fact that it's more open and it's forcing those students to record what they're hearing, writing down main points, writing down examples, writing down statistics, testimonies, transitions, making sure they record the thesis and so forth. So it's much more helpful in terms of teaching them active learning. For us, though, in terms of critiquing student speeches, this form is more helpful. And you'll find that on that resources page in the College Now page, so you can download, copy, print out as many as you need, obviously, of course. In terms of our conversation over the next 40 minutes or so, and coincidentally, I should say that if you have questions as we go through and we're talking about different aspects or areas, feel free to shout them out. We're a small enough group that I think we can have a sort of a more informal conversation rather than a raise your hand and be recognized kind of situation. We developed the rubric around Cicero's canons of rhetoric, except of course the forgotten canon of memory. And so invention or the construction, selection of a speech and consideration of the context and everything, organization or outlining, putting the thing together, delivery, and then style or language use in this case. And then I also want to make a very quick little plea for some data collection that our program needs to do. And so we're going to set up some new kind of standards in terms of things that we're going to require from high schools in the College Now program. So things that we're going to archive, if you will, for assessment purposes. To begin, the invention section, and you can follow along on your rubric. You probably already read ahead a little bit. The invention section of the rubric has there are 6 actually competencies when you consider the group one. The 5 competencies relate to those aspects of invention, creation, selection of a topic, and narrowing and focusing of that topic, research, and audience analysis, and so forth. When it comes to the first competency, determining the purpose of the specific purpose of a speech, in terms of advanced to emerging, we'd see a student who's at the emerging level as being somebody who recognizes that there are 3 purposes for oral communication: to inform, to persuade, and to mark a special occasion or entertain, but isn't necessarily using them that effectively, and they may confuse them, and it may reflect in their presentation or their speech. They may give, for example, a persuasive speech that is more informative in nature, or they may give an informative speech that becomes persuasive. Even though they realize there are differences, they might not be able to execute them as effectively. A student who's in a more developing area will certainly be able to know where those lines are, demarcate them, and be able to give an informative speech when the subject and context calls for it, a persuasive speech when it calls for it, and so forth. but probably is not recognizing the unique integrated nature of them or utilizing it as much. And certainly an advanced student would be able to know when he or she needs to do some informing in a persuasive context in order to get an audience swayed to their side, and knows when they need to persuade or try to entice an audience and create more interest when they want to try to inform them or educate them. The second competency is choosing and restricting topics. This, I think, probably speaks for itself in terms of moving from what is emerging to advanced. Certainly somebody who is an advanced level. Think about advanced as being somebody who's really experiencing, or rather executing mastery of skills. Somebody who has not only chosen an effective topic that is unique, but is also helpful and really impactful for the audience. They're choosing a topic that is of interest to them, but also has some kind of buy-in for the audience. They're able to create that common ground, and they carry it through. Somebody who's at a more emerging level is probably choosing a topic because they feel comfortable with it, which is fine, but they haven't taken that step further to find out the relevance for the audience and really be able to articulate it to the audience. That's somebody who's more developing or advanced would do. I had a student in my class last spring semester who gave a speech about horses because she loved horses and she'd raised horses all her life. And it was really a personal talk about horses and the wonderful things that horses have done in her life. And it was wonderful. It was a really captivating speech, and her passion for the subject really showed. And so that helped carry us as an audience, and we were interested and engaged. But afterwards, even in our post-speech critique session with the other students, one of them asked, I'd love to know how I could get involved in raising horses, or what I could, and so it was sort of a subtle and really kind way of saying, could you connect this to me more? And so that's an example of probably a student who is more on the lower end of developing, or maybe in the upper end of emerging in terms of her topic selection and being able to link it to the audience. The third one, to locate and evaluate information resources effectively. Here, obviously, we're talking about media literacy or information literacy, and actually in D we are as well a little bit, but choosing sources that are primary and secondary sources, recognizing that there are primary and secondary sources, and that sources are important in supporting or reinforcing arguments in a presentation is something we'd see at an emerging level. More developing level would be somebody who is utilizing primary and secondary sources and evaluating those sources, weighing their relevance, and making selections that are strategic for supporting their presentation. Somebody at the advanced level of research is probably not only doing all of the things I mentioned earlier, but they're also starting to cite contrary evidence in a persuasive speech. Now, my opponent will tell you this, and he has some good points, but here's where he's gone wrong. Here's some research that refutes that information. That's probably what we'd see at an advanced level. And I'll be frank with you, I don't see that a great deal in my collegiate classroom. And so, it's a rare student that comes along and actually is able to do those sorts of things.
Should we be teaching them how to do that? Because I know in the English class that you can teach a persuasive essay where they do have to, at one point of that essay, mention another argument and then counter it. And we talk about where to place it.
Right. Yeah, you should. And I think it's part of the persuasive unit. We have to be able to, it is one of the competencies of our course. We want students to be able to entertain an alternative perspective and be able to make a sound, rational judgment about the validity of it and the accuracy of that argument, or be able to refute it. And so yes, it is. And this is something that with our faculty association on campus, because Karen emphasizes is something bigger, particularly with respect to group communication and their competency with respect to doing all of this in a group context or group setting. We had to make it very clear as a faculty in our program that this one course is not going to make them all advanced, just like that. In effective audience analysis, effective research, they're all not going to be great speakers. We had lots of feedback from other faculty when we redesigned the general studies and the speech communication course that students, for example, did not have a lot of experience in doing group presentations in their upper division biology seminar class, or in their, you know, their history and systems of psychology class. And their group presentations were just kind of dismal, we were told. So could you do something in your class to teach them how to do a good group presentation? And I actually was contacted by an accounting professor, and I was a guest presenter in this class a couple of times, to just walk through in 20 minutes, here's how you do a group presentation, right? Here's how, you know, this is what you need to do. And then, you know, the first thing is like, well, you gotta get together and practice. Gotta talk to each other, and they don't do that. But anyway, we made it very clear that it's okay, we're going to incorporate that, but we are just going to be introducing concepts. Some of the students are going to be progressing to a level of advanced, but some of them are just going to be developing, or maybe even just emerging when they leave the course. But throughout the course of their liberal education program, and that's the purpose of the general studies or a liberal education program, is to, in their first year, introduce the building blocks, and then hopefully in the courses throughout their years of study, they will reach, if not an advanced level, at least a higher level of competency in a variety of different contexts, in social science and communication and writing and so forth.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to bring up. The rubric that you're looking at is one of two partners. There's this rubric that we use in our classes, and then there's kind of the general rubric that we have upper level, other discipline classes use in their oral presentations. So it all kind of feeds in, you know, to the same goal, in that we're hoping that eventually they end up advanced, but you're probably not going to see many students for which you're going to circle advanced in your classes, because that's just not the stage at which this rubric is being used.
So, but yeah, that's an excellent question. But yeah, we do need to be teaching those kinds of concepts, those things. The stuff that's over in that advanced column, I think that's what we need to be teaching to. It may seem like a home run hit out of the ballpark for some kids in your classes, but I have found in my years of teaching that if you lay out those expectations, oh, okay, then if I know what I'm doing, then I can shoot for that, I can do that. For you all teaching the College Now program, I know, and is it Katie? Katie is her first year. She's going to be doing College Now this fall. The first thing you're looking for is clear expectations. Okay, tell me what I need to do. Right? Just tell me what I need to do. Lay out the expectations for me, and then I'll do that. Right? That's what I'll do. And so I think our students are that way too. Well, you know that. In terms of the fourth competency here, utilizing appropriate supporting material, here too, I kind of piggyback that on the earlier conversation about research resources, but being able to recognize different types of support, but using them in creative and unique ways. Perhaps even using someone's own words to support your side, or an opponent's words to support your side of an argument. Truly artistic and artful use of support. You've probably seen them today as well. Utilizing effective audience analysis in terms of preparation. This is one I know that I struggle with in classes, even though we talk about audience analysis, and I certainly try to equip them with the skills they need to be effective in terms of analyzing an audience. They don't necessarily carry that through. I think mainly because they're so wrapped up in, oh my God, what am I going to do? But they don't think about the audience being the most important really party in the communication, the person that they're putting it all together for. But somebody who's more advanced, obviously, is not only using obvious instances of common ground, but subtle and really sophisticated ways of connecting that subject. How, no matter how far out and bizarre it is, bat saliva, that kind of thing, to us, right? How does it relate to this specific audience, or how is it going to enrich their lives? And then, of course, certainly doing all of those things effectively as a group is a competency that this course has. So how do we effectively focus a topic as a group, research a topic effectively as a group? Do we delegate responsibility for researching different aspects of the outline or the topic? How do we effectively utilize outside sources, documentation, and so forth? Other questions? Okay, I'm going to turn the floor over to, I think I am, aren't I? Yeah. I'm going to turn the floor over to Hillary to talk about the organization competencies, and then we've got a couple of samples, I think, of sort of emerging and advanced, if they work. I think they will.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think they're going to.
Okay. Yeah, I chose to hijack the discussion for the organization portion because organization excites me. So I'm gonna kind of take over my favorite little part. I enjoy organization, I like talking about organization. And it's interesting that you use the example of a speech about bat saliva because I have given that speech. So that's kind of fun and interesting. I don't know if you meant to do that, but probably not. Anyway, for the organization part of the big rubric, and you may even notice on the assessment tool, you notice that the body portion, the organization portion, kind of takes up a lot of space. There's a lot of emphasis given in the way that we grade our speeches to organization and structuring the body and transitioning and all of that stuff. And so all of those things that we're trying to gauge them on in that portion of the assessment tool, oddly, is covered in this very small, these little tiny components of the big, broader rubric. But what I kind of want to do is not necessarily, read to you what this says, but kind of explain, okay, that makes sense on paper, but what does it look like? Because I know for me, that's been what I've struggled with the most. And I've even looked at some of the evaluations I filled out. The first year we implemented this, I piloted it for a summer class. And I was giving out advanced, like they were candy. And it's like I just didn't quite grasp what that actually looked like. And it has occurred to me recently that most of my students are 3s. That's just kind of, and then maybe they'll move up to a 4. And then maybe you'll get the student who just loves organization the way you do, and they'll get a 5. But it's just not all that common. And so if you look at, the little title thing for the organization, which is focused on demonstrating that they get how to take their speech purpose, take all that stuff that they did with the invention, and then how do I package it? How do I take my speech purpose and push that forward and see that through in a way that makes sense, basically. So when you look at the A here, wherein we want them to utilize suitable and effective organizational strategies, you can kind of think of that as the organizational patterns, topical, spatial, chronological. Do they get what those things mean? Do they understand that you really can't use spatial for persuasion? Are they showing you that they get the different purposes for those things? So in emerging speech, you're going to be watching them and thinking to yourself, okay, they're trying here. They have some main points. Maybe we lose sight of our thesis every now and again, but they have some main points. They're trying. They're working at it, but they lack control, I guess, over kind of the outline of their speech. They don't seem to always exactly know where they're going. It's there, but it's just they're not really in control of it. Whereas when you get more toward the advanced side, obviously you're looking for a student who not only has main points, but those main points are balanced, they are coherent, you can always tell that they align with that speech purpose, that they are interesting, that they have worked out how to transition between those main points in a way that makes sense. So for me, when I'm watching a speech, at least talking about organizational patterns, I'm looking for control. Does that student, can I see their outline in my head as they're giving their speech? And if the answer is no, you're probably looking at, an emerging or even a low-level developing speech. I mean, you're kind of thinking of examples as I'm saying this, of students that you've watched and those moments where you're watching them and going, okay, what? Like those are the moments where you're looking at 2s and 3s, where you can't exactly follow. And then building off of that, moving into the B portion, providing effective transitions, here's where you're actually concentrating, okay, yes, they clearly have the main points, they're working, they're negotiating through them, but how artful are those transitions? Do they always come consistently at the beginning of main points, at the end of main points? Do they miss one? Are those transitions simply, now that we've discussed blank, I'm going to discuss blank, and is it always that every time? You're looking for, again, control, but also, as you move from emerging, developing, advanced, you're looking for a student who not only can anticipate in their head where they are in their outline, I'm going to transition now, but I'm also going to make it sound nice. I'm going to make it sound like that. And actually,
learn how to use it like a tool. It's not just a few words you got to throw in here and there.
Yeah, and sometimes I forget, but I try to bring that up. It's like, this isn't just busy work, this helps you.
And it takes
Like,
them a while to
keep
get
yourself
that.
online. It's not just for me, it's not just for them, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
So,
that's what they're there for.
yeah, so when I'm listening to a speech and I hear someone say every time, you know, they're always on it and they say, first I'm going to talk about this, then I'm going to talk about this, or now that I've talked, I'm going to talk. If I hear that every time, I'm thinking very solid developing. They get it, they know what they're doing, but they haven't quite figured out how to make it their own. They haven't really learned how to make it interesting yet. So that's what you're looking for, I guess, when you're watching speeches. And then this final component, as you'll notice as we go along, there's always a little group thing at the end because we've now incorporated a group speech assignment into the course, and so there kind of have to be different things that you're looking for. And we're going to talk pretty in-depth about the group presentation in the other session. It was supposed to be this one, but now it's that one. But when you're looking for the structural elements of a group presentation, really we're looking for cohesion and integration. You're looking for a presentation that, you know, you look at the outline, it's one speech that subscribes to the same unified goal. All the main points end up with a purpose. You know, it all matches up together. It's not just this speaker is a part of this group and they're talking about the same topic, but it's totally off in left field from everybody else. There's where you're kind of looking at the emerging side of things, whereas an advanced presentation, structurally, is going to feel like one whole presentation being executed by more than one person. Does that make sense?
I liked the way you described it to me, where it was, or to the kids, whichever, where for the group presentation, it was almost like you had speeches within speeches. So the organizational pattern had, you know, your first main point will also have their main points and their previews and reviews and transitions and everything, and how that all fit together, all the little pieces.
Yeah, and it might seem kind of counterproductive, because I do explain it that way. It's like, think of it like a speech within a speech, but that's just the base level, so that you get substructure. That's really what I'm after when I teach it that way. It's like, I want subpoints. So when you yourself, you individual, are outlining your portion of this speech, you should think of it as your main point is your little internal thesis, almost, the thing you're trying to get across, and within that you should organize it. And then from that point, once everybody has a main point with subpoints, okay, let's do some checks and balances and make sure that all of our main points line up and move up the pyramid, I guess, for lack of a better term. So this stuff that we've kind of dealt with kind of more corresponds to the body of the speech. I don't know if you've been noticing that. You might be thinking, okay, what about intros and conclusions? Ooh, it's part of it, and it is part of it. And you'll notice in the rubric that there are things mentioned about, in the emerging, developing, and advanced, about intros and conclusions. But again, that can be, you know, strange to try to look for. It's like, okay, I teach my students how to do an intro. They need an attention getter, they need common ground, they need to establish their credibility, reveal the thesis, give a preview, so on and so forth. But again, what does that look like? So what we did, and we put these together for when we did the presentation to our faculty as a whole when they were thinking about what things look like. What we did is we drafted up sample intros and conclusions that were emerging and advanced. And as one of the people who wrote them, it was very fun to kind of think of an emerging intro. What does that look like? I've seen those before. So I'm going to try to make it go.
Yep, it'll just take a second to load.
Okay, so this is the emerging one. Pause. Pause. So when you're watching it, I kind of want you to be thinking about the stuff listed in that rubric in terms of attention getters and previews and things like that. Look for things that are present and things that are absent. And I think you'll see why we've chosen to classify this particular intro as emerging rather than one of the higher categorizations.
And you eat too much sugar.
So I started back.
How many of you eat too much sugar? How many of you grew up eating sugary cereal? How many of you ordered a sugary drink from Starbucks today? Well, I'm going to talk about childhood obesity and why it's a big fat problem in the world today. My first point.
Okay. Thoughts on our dear student here? She is one of our students, very talented. Which one is the one I want? This one? Yes. So, I mean, what were your initial reactions to that intro? As an instructor who sees students all the time.
A lot of questions.
Compelling rhetorical questions.
Were people raising their hands, and was she making sure she was looking at everyone raising hands, because there was all that time?
Yeah, technically speaking, there was nobody there because we were just kind of filming her. But yeah, I think the idea would be that she would wait for hands, which may or may not show up. You know, it's like you don't know what you're going to get when you ask questions like that. But yeah, that was the idea.
And how would you address that too? Because would you ever want a student to do that technique?
I find it kind of risky, frankly, especially since these are students who aren't necessarily in control of speaking space. You know, they may not know how to react to having no hands raised. You know, they don't know how to go forward from that. For me, I mean, that's kind of where I say, all right, here's the base level. You need an attention getter. This is an attention getter. So like, instead of having not present circled, I'd rather have this. But at the same time, it's just not effective because you never know what you're going to get. Unless you've done, you know, an audience analysis and you know that 50%, 50%, and it's, you know, it's just not going to happen. So that, for me, that would be a 2. If it was clever and funny in the moment, unlike this, I might give it a 3, I don't know. But yeah, it's emerging. What did you think of her thesis? I mean, listening to her kind of explaining this stuff, she really didn't have a preview. It was more of like, okay, I'm just going to transition into main point 1, you know, yeah, the thesis.
Wasn't the
Was
thesis like, I'm going to tell you about the big fat problem? Was that the thesis? I'm going to tell you?
It was an assertion that it's a big fat problem.
Right. And also a little bit offensive. A little bit offensive. You know, maybe not quite how you'd want to frame up the rest of your speech. Anyway, I mean, you can kind of see that the attention getter was so-so. She really didn't take any time to do common ground or relate or even establish any sense of credibility. Why does she know anything about, you know, this problem? And then the thesis I thought was offensive and there was no preview. So for me, this is, you know, a 1 or a 2. Whereas an advanced introduction, you know, looks a little bit different. And I'm sure that some of you have seen students deliver like this.
According to the Center for Disease Control's website, last updated on March 21st, 2011, in the United States alone, tobacco use will cause approximately 1 in 5 deaths annually. That means that statistically speaking, 5 out of the 25 people in this room are likely to die from tobacco-related illnesses. Now, I'm not up here to persuade you to stop smoking or to shun those who do. However, I am here to persuade you to support one practical alternative that will help keep smokers healthier, should they choose to smoke, and also keep the air cleaner for everyone. First, I will discuss the health problems associated with traditional cigarettes before explaining how e-cigarettes are a viable alternative to smokers and can alleviate problems with secondhand smoke.
Different reactions to this?
Awesome.
Yeah, pretty good. I mean, the delivery obviously is not, you know, it's not her speech. She's like standing in front of a camera reading an intro that I shoved in her face. You know, it's like, it's not really her speech. Obviously, you'd hope to see a little bit more verve, shall we say, from a persuasive introduction. But yeah, the attention getter was a statistic, which is great. I love statistics. Her thesis not only was very clear in terms of the purpose of the speech, but there was justification kind of tacked onto the end. I'm here to persuade you of this, and here's why I'm doing that. Like, there's a reason I'm here to persuade you of this. And then she had a really banging preview.
Kind of like the fact that she had her sources and everything.
Yeah, to it again. Yeah, it was a good citation. And I liked the little thing where she said, where she tied the statistic to the audience,
Yes.
saying, so statistically, 1 in 5 or 5 of you people are gonna, develop something, so you guys should care about this, because it could be you. It's like that little fear tactic, I don't know. But you can see the difference. And so that's, what we're trying to look for when we look at the descriptions in the rubric, that's what it looks like. Same thing goes for conclusions, and what we did is we basically, the emerging conclusion, or the emerging intro matches the conclusion and the advanced intro matches, so you can kind of topically follow where that came from.
So is that last one an advanced or a development?
I would call it advanced. I would call it, she could certainly have made the beginning of the thesis probably more artful, instead of saying, I am here to persuade you, blah. But it's solid. I really thought that was solid. So we've got her little conclusion here about obesity.
Obesity is a big fat problem today. I know if I had the choice, I would surely not want obesity to exist anymore. And you shouldn't either.
Sassy.
What a call to action! Yeah, I think again we could kind of see there was no review. Her thesis was as bad the second time as it was the first. So, but it was there. So it's not present. It was present, but she's just lacking in the, again, control over the message, control over the different components of what makes a conclusion, which we all understand. It's the review, the restatement of the thesis, and kind of a motivating factor. I typically encourage my students to just return to their attention getter, which forces them to have one, which is nice. But it also, I like bookends, just personally. I find that really balanced, and I think the students also, it helps them keep track of what they're doing. Again, forces them to make a good attention getter, so it's kind of tricksy. And then, so here's the corresponding advanced conclusion from the advanced introduction.
As I mentioned in the introduction, statistics suggest that 5 out of the 25 people in this class are likely to die from tobacco-related illnesses. But those statistics are based on what's happened in the past. We don't have to accept that as our future. After discussing the health problems associated with traditional cigarettes and the benefits of e-cigarettes, we can see that we each have the power to halt smoking-related deaths by supporting a cleaner alternative. E-cigarettes. After all, we should have the right to a healthier lifestyle and to breathe cleaner air.
So, the reason I liked this so much, it was short. I think it's shorter than you might have expected an advanced conclusion to be, but again, conclusions are short, and she hit all of her bases. What I particularly liked about that one is that her segue into the conclusion, there was a little bit of kind of a call to action in there as well. So it was kind of the first thing that was happening in the conclusion, a motivational statement, following it up with the preview and the thesis. I just thought that was really creative. I thought that was something to be rewarded.
Are these going to be available so we can go back and look at them and maybe show our students them?
Sure.
Absolutely. And I think there are other, not necessarily examples of intros and conclusions, but we have other speech samples donated by fellow instructors.
Yeah, we intend to put, and for those of you that aren't going to be in the other session, I'll just make a quick plug for it. I've got control of the speech essentials of speaking and listening resource page now. Prior to a month ago, anything I wanted changed, I had to go through like 5 people to get it changed, and I said, "Can't you just give me access?" And so they did. Apparently, when you teach here 17 years, then they finally trust you. And so they gave me access. So I've gone through and I've changed some things. And so I'm actually I put out a call, kind of a general call. If you have like exemplary speeches from your class that you'd love to share with other people, or if you have activities you use in class, if you have particular handouts that you just have really worked well for you in the past, send them my way. And there's a link on the resource page for my email, so you can send them to me. if you're willing to share them. And then we can use that kind of as a clearinghouse for getting ideas, activities, and that kind of thing. But yeah, web speeches, we need
Sometimes
to get
they're
them posted up there.
visual to see
Yeah,
it.
it's like, okay,
Have
let's
a
look at a
big
good
difference.
example. And it also is a great way to talk about listening and active listening and the speech critique process when they're critiquing.
Yeah.
If you can all look at a sample one that isn't somebody in their classroom, and so you can
Exactly.
talk about that, yeah.
Or some random person on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Right, they're a little more apt to be critical, I think, when it's not somebody in the class with them that they don't know watching it in live time.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the general idea when talking about the organization section of the rubric. You're looking for, not only do they seem to understand that there are different components to all of these things, but do they have control over them? And can they not only execute them, but execute them creatively and smoothly and with some regard to what the audience would care to hear. Questions?
Is it my turn? Yeah, this keeps working.
Back over.
If it doesn't keep working, it had some sort of issue. Now our section goes to 110, am I right?
210?
210. 210, and then a little break, and then 220 to 3:30 is the last session. Okay, so I'm going to go quick. I'm going to go quickly, but you know the next sections of the rubric are really, I think they're parts that most of us are fairly comfortable with in terms of competencies and delivery. The only thing that might throw you a little is some of the organization, the structuring, and where things are located. The first competency under delivery, employing vocal variety and rate and pitch and intensity, not only is voice pitch, rate, intensity, and that sort of thing included there, but also diction and proper pronunciation, articulation, enunciation, and so forth. So the first time that, and actually the first draft of this rubric, we had diction as a competency, and then, I don't know, through one of the revisions, it was like, we've got too many competencies, we got to collapse. And so we just made one for voice, basically. And I think that's pretty self-explanatory.
Ours appears to be different than yours.
Does it?
Because we're on delivery,
Yeah.
demonstrates vocal variety and appropriate diction.
Okay,
So you've got
Yep,
a few
this
more
is an
ones
old
up
one.
there. Oh, okay.
this is the old one. But it
Okay.
is, there are only 5, right, competencies under delivery? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that is, you have the new one,
Okay.
and I've got an old one from an old PowerPoint slide, I think was probably, I cut and pasted this from a PowerPoint I did.
Just checking.
I don't think it was August of last year. Anyway, so diction is there in the competency, I'm glad. I need to change that.
I think, at least this has been a pitfall for me, since there are so many competencies wrapped up in delivery, how do you handle assigning emerging, developing, advanced when there are so many, and they may be like really great with voice, but not so much with nonverbal, and okay with this, and not so much, like,
Right.
how do we weight it? How do we do that?
Well, I always look at it holistically, and I can forgive a lack of eye contact or a speaker who's tied to their note cards, more than they should be. If their voice is effective and they're using their gestures and everything else seems to be part of the package, I could still rate them as the upper end of developing. Probably wouldn't put them in an advanced category if they didn't have at least some significant markers in all of these areas. But if it's just that one thing that they have some issues with, and it's maybe a management of anxiety thing, and it manifests itself with escaping into the note card. They're not looking at their note card, they're not relying on it, they're just escaping into the note card because they don't want to have those 12 people staring at them. They know the speech because they've probably done it. They've probably done it 70 times, so they know the speech. They're just escaping. Yeah. So, I would still probably rate them higher. But then they know that. But that's one of the things
But I'm
they
thinking on here, I'm
Mhm.
still gonna be using the
Yeah.
space for individual
Yeah.
comments on these
exactly,
things.
exactly on the critique form.
I can't help myself, and I'm sure everybody else is found.
Oh yeah. And if you now you have the critique form beside you because the rubric and all of the competencies, right, is really something that needs to be a companion to the critique form you're using. But we can't have that huge rubric every time we grade a speech that's 6 pages. But the critique form does have a 6-point scale on it. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but since you've got it in front of you, the 6-point scale from 0 to 6 actually allows for a couple of different numbers in each category. So 5 and 6 would be an advanced placement, and 4 and 5 would be developing, and 1 and 2 would be am I off the number?
3 and 4 were
3 and 4.
developing.
Yeah, 3 and 4 were developing, and then 1 and 2 would be emerging. And the only reason that we've assigned those numbers, that 6-point scale, or actually 7 if you consider 0, is so that we can do some statistical assessment data with it. Don't equate those points, or those numbers, excuse me, with points. This deliveries were 6 points, okay. No. And I'm going to get to in a second, and we're going to share some examples of critique forms and stuff, the way we fill them out. You might assign specific point totals to different parts of the speech yourself. That you're going to focus more specifically on the organization and the structure and the persuasive speech, and less on delivery and that kind of thing. In terms of weighting various aspects of the speech. Nonverbal support, the behavior that supports the message, anything other than their voice, that part of nonverbal communication that reinforces or augments their message. Certainly their body position, posture, gestures, use of eye contact, facial expressions, and so forth. All falls into that category, you know that. Managing communication anxiety effectively, obviously we're all working on that, but some of us have more tricks than others, and our students are certainly developing them, but you can read those specific aspects of the competencies for yourselves. Presentation skills, or utilizing presentation aids effectively. That one didn't change, did it? The wording, is it the same as yours? Okay. I thought maybe we tweaked that one a little bit, but this involves not just visual aids, because immediately our mind goes to that, but also using note cards and how effectively they're using manuscripts or PowerPoint slides if they're giving a PowerPoint presentation rather than a formal public speech sort of presentation, and how effectively they utilize those aids, whether they're over-reliant on them or are using them to reinforce the message. And that's something that I have colleagues who have a problem with. They're over-reliant on them.
So then would you say that for regular speech, so say we're on the persuasive speech and they're using just note cards instead of having posters or visuals, you would still grade them on the rubric with presentational aids?
Yes, how
Because
effectively they're using
cards.
notes. Yeah, how effectively they use the notes, whether they were inconspicuous or whether they drew attention to themselves.
Okay.
Again, it's like the kid that escapes to the notes a lot would probably be ranked lower in terms of that. But certainly in terms of visual aids, if they're using visual aids.
Are they allowed visual aids for persuasive speech?
That's a good question. It was just going through my mind. I do not encourage them to use visual aids. I do not forbid them to use visual aids. Do I have any that use visual aids? Rarely. I think last semester I didn't have any of the students in my class use them for the persuasive, or for an earlier speech. They just did for the group presentation. And the only thing I warn them, I say, well, we haven't talked about the effective employment or use of them, and I can give you a few quick pointers. You can read the chapter about visual aids and visual presentation, but we're not going to have time to walk through examples as a class, talk about them. So you're kind of sailing out there.
And you can't just do a PowerPoint, so that kind
No,
of like,
you can't do a
I don't get
PowerPoint,
it.
so no. Well, yeah, and some students, immediately when you
They think
say,
they're
well, then you
right.
can't use a PowerPoint presentation. Oh. So, okay, that dissuades them right away. And this, too, I think would be a great way to have some examples of using effective visual aids. How do we use visual aids effectively? We can just see have some clips. I've got some short clips, and we can put them on the resource page. That'd be nice. And then, of course, doing everything effectively together as a group. Language use or style, that competency, certainly just employing it artfully so that you're able to increase the impact of your message. We know students are still developing vocabularies and language. Some students are more advanced than others. Some are still just going to be developing or emerging. But we'll place them somewhere on that scale. Certainly students that are using higher end figures of speech, rhetorical devices, repetition, metaphors and analogies, or allegories even. I mean, they're really using advanced rhetorical devices to try to tie the entire speech together. Clever transitional devices. Without getting corny, you know. The theme of our workshop today, like get hooked in to, college now is clever, but we could beat that metaphor to death if we wanted to. Like, let's reel in some great ideas for speech. Bait our hook with some great supporting material. But it's still clever, right? It's still clever. Okay, this is quick, but in terms of data collection, now I want to transition from the rubric into talking a little bit about data collection, then hopefully we'll have at least a couple minutes with some questions and answers. In terms of our assessment efforts as a program, what we are endeavoring to do is to collect instructor critique forms, these forms that you have, the form you have in front of you here, from every speech in every section. So, and I know that some of you, particularly those that have worked with me in the past, we haven't done this. I've had you send me representative samples or something like that. But we're going to be trying to, I should say, oh, somebody messed with this. We're going to be trying to archive critique forms for every speech, every section. And eventually, those of you who are supervised, Jen Milbush is a supervising professor, we're going to have a recording form to actually submit these. So we'll either do them, and I'd love to do them electronically so we could just scan them in and then just keep them electronically instead of having paper piling up. But just so that we can eventually do some data collection on our rubric in terms of developing to advanced. And we're probably going to be, we're not going to be looking at all the aspects every year, but we may be looking specifically at introductions 1 year, or we may be trying to assess how effectively we're doing with presentation aids 1 year. And so we may be doing some crunching of numbers and going into those critique sheets and gleaning information from them. So from every College Now site, as well as every section on campus, we're going to be trying to archive these.
This year, do you want them digitally?
Well, or they don't have to be digital. They don't have to be digital. But if it's easier for you to scan them and then just email them, or if it's easier for you to just put them in an envelope and send them, like you've done in the past. That's perfect.
Do you want them right afterward, or can we send them,
Depending on your cooperating teachers, some of your supervisor may want it right away, and that's what I would recommend. You just send it right away, because then it's like outside our mind. I've done that, cross it off. But otherwise, you might be able to, like the exams and impromptus, you might be able to send later if you are able to get them at the time.
Well, I know as a cooperating instructor, I like to receive them kind of in real time as they go along, because then it's like, if I'm noticing that somebody, that an instructor either, I don't know, missed something on the eval, I can be like, oh, don't forget this next time. Or, just little things, so that at the end of the semester, I don't get them and be like, oh crap, I could have put out this fire, but now I can. So, I don't know, I like to be in conversation throughout the semester.
Okay.
I think it's important for the high school teachers to realize too, maybe they want to make a photocopy of this before they
For
send it
sure.
to the professor, because
Sure.
your students are going to want this input too. So photocopy it right away, send one to the
Right. Yes, good
professor
point.
of record, and
Good
then
point.
hand one out to the kid.
Yes. I've been starting to collect mine, and so, but what did I do with it? Yeah, it's here. Anyway, but I photocopied. I'm sorry, I wasted it. It killed trees. I photocopied mine. I haven't scanned them yet either, but I'm going to eventually in the future. I'll scan them. But so I just photocopied, and then before I hand them back, and I obviously plenty of room for comments on the back, but. I'm rating them on that developmental scale in every area. Each area, I apologize, this is terrible visual aid use because it's so tiny to see back there. I'm rating them in each area and how effectively they're linking the topic of the audience and everything all the way through, and then place them on the scale down below. I'm very clear to tell the students that, I placed you here at developing, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get a terrible grade, or if you're advanced. I mean, it isn't necessarily equating with a grade. Yes, they're kind of related. Certainly students who are more emerging are going to have lower grades than students who are advanced.
Yeah, how do you turn that over from that to a grade then?
You don't necessarily do that. Personally, I've been doing it for so many years, I just do it, but you can. I'll show you, can I show one of Hillary's samples?
Oh, I have, you want one?
Oh, no, I got one here.
Oh, here.
I think Hillary had some points on hers. Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess they do, never mind. This is really faint and hard to see, but she's actually weighted her various sections of it. Like for language use, 5 points. For invention and topic selection, 10 points. So she's given the student 10 out of 10, 5 out of 5, and so forth, 7 out of 10 for this section. So that's one way that you can weight your points for each component, for each area. Obviously, teamwork wasn't an issue with this, it's persuasive speech. So.
Yeah, and so basically what you're seeing up here is there are points assigned to the various sections, and so if they are completing the assignment, according to the assignment parameters, if they are doing the assignment, they're probably gonna see some good points, because they did the assignment. But the developmental scale is meant to sort of gauge how well did they.
And how they can.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there have been students who are really great with organization and they're gonna get full points for body and organization, but when it comes to delivery or when it comes to those other considerations, not so much. So their development is gonna be like, I've given out A's to a person who has a 4 circled, you know? Because they're completing the assignment the way I asked them, but perhaps they're just not as, proficient with the skills as an advanced person.
So you've taken off 10 for going overtime,
Yep.
and then minus 13 is other deductions.
Oh, no, that's fine. The 13, the other one was the note card thing. They did not have 35 words or less.
Ah, okay,
So they got some points.
okay.
Do you have a specific number of points you take off for note card?
I think that's an instructor's prerogative now, isn't it?
Just curious.
Because we took it out of the rubric. It's no longer in the
Yeah.
bottom corner.
Yeah, I
Is
know.
there
I
one
think
over under?
the syllabus actually.
Does the syllabus say?
Yeah,
Alright.
it does.
Grade
Does.
deduction.
Yeah.
I think this is a great deduction.
So
If they still use 2 back note, 5 note cards written on one side only.
And so if that particular one wasn't a full grade deduction, it might have been that it wasn't, the note cards weren't good. Like there was weird, things going on, it wasn't so good.
Also going to post some of these, critique forms too. I think that would be helpful, at least it always is for me. And how different instructors use the critique form. You can use it how you like, but you just need to use it. Also, video capture of performances is going to be, is going to be part of our assessment data collection efforts. We started out saying that we'd really just, as a program, we would just like persuasive speeches to make sure that we have video copies of all the persuasive speeches. For the College Now sites, I think it would be best if we had all the speeches submitted to your supervisor, just so that we can archive them. That doesn't necessarily mean, as you know, that your College Now supervisor will be reviewing all of them, because our whole compensation model has changed. They're going to be reviewed randomly, and then you'll get some feedback, hopefully, if you need feedback, on the critique process or evaluation process. So you'll be submitting all of your critique sheets, outlines, and videotape or audio tape, or I should say DVD or digital video of your speeches as quickly as you can after the presentation is over, and then your supervising professor will turn that around as quickly as possible. But then those videos will also get, recordings will also get archived for assessment purposes too. And we may do some sort of blind assessment with them. Haven't gotten to that bridge yet, but we may actually go in and sort of randomly select speeches from on campus and off campus and College Now and everything, and just do some blind coding among faculty members in the program, just to say, okay, where are we all rating these speakers, and not connecting them to specific classrooms or anything like that, but just overall to see how we're doing really as a program in terms of teaching these competencies. The last thing that we're going to implement this year is a course exit survey. We've done this on campus for a couple of years now. I'm going to pass that around. And I don't see any reason why we shouldn't implement this in College Now sections too. A course exit survey is just going to actually look for, first of all, are all the requirements in the classes met? And then students' expectations or perceptions of how effectively or helpful the class was.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. This survey, it isn't live yet, but if you go to the College Now page again, and you will just instruct your students to go to Documents, Forms, and Surveys right here, and then click on Surveys. If teach English 151, you're already doing this, or your students should be already doing this. Click on surveys. Well, you're in the right spot. And you'll see a number of different surveys. Here's the English 151 survey, and the Speech 110 Essentials of Speaking and Listening exit survey will be here. And so have your students at the end of the course log in. It's SurveyMonkey. It won't take them very long. The hard copy Hillary handed out to all of you, it just gets their perceptions of how the presentation or the class is gone.
Is that on the syllabus, Mark, in the syllabus?
No, it's not in the syllabus.
Okay.
No.
Can you cover again how you got there? I was.
Yep, I certainly can. If you go to, if you can find the main College Now page, then you scroll down on the side over here to Documents, Forms, and Surveys. I think I'll put a link on our information resource page too, but Documents, Forms, and Surveys, and then you click on Surveys link right here, and when you click there, it'll take you to that page where the surveys are. And if you've done the English, I can go to the English one, and you can see what it will look like. It'll be just like this.
Kids like doing stuff like that, you might feel like they're moving the voice.
Right. The important thing is that the participation is anonymous for the survey, and that the notation at the bottom, actually it's near the top, this is not intended to be any kind of reflection or assessment of the instructor of the class, but rather the class and how it was presented. And so don't feel like, oh my gosh, my students are going to be evaluating me. No, they should be evaluating the course. Did they like the group presentation assignment? Did they like the persuasive assignment? Or did they find the impromptu experience helpful? That kind of thing. And so that is that. And then I'm over time. I'm cutting 5 minutes into your. Yeah, it's break time. It's break time. Watch that resources page for more information about sample speeches, group presentations too. I'm starting to collect examples of group presentations to be able to share. Those are helpful because a student wants to know, hey, how is that supposed to look when I get it put together? That's helpful when you're starting that unit too.
We'll talk about that next.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that next. All right. Enjoy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.